Hello everyone, welcome to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. My name is Pojo, and today we're going to be looking at a new mechanic from Flame of Zolta, and we're going to be talking about all the spoilers that we have seen in the last couple of days for Flame of Zolta. There's been quite a few really interesting ones, probably the most interesting of which is this one, Ramba Arena Showman, a 3-cost Fire Time giant that is a 4/4 with several abilities. When it hits the enemy player, you reduce the cost of each card in your hand by 1. Typically not an extremely powerful effect, but the kind of thing that you want to see on a unit rather than on a card. So quite good if you can get it going, and definitely gives you some good Praxis ramp things going on. Also has pay 7 to play the top card of your deck, which all of the cards in your deck are very, very expensive. Rambo Arena Showman makes that a lot more viable. So this card has similar stats to Champion of Impulse in terms of if you have a lot of fire and time influence, it is a 4/4 for 3, which is a pretty reasonable stat line with also pretty reasonable abilities. Both of the cards have actually a lot of similarities in terms of they both do interesting things to further your aggression and also allow you to play bigger cards in Praxis, which is a pretty important deal. Ramba has a lot more top end and a lot more just general reliability. You can play him as a 4/4 a little bit earlier than you can play Praxis or Champion of Impulse, although getting 3 time is sometimes a little bit easier than getting double fire, double time, to be fair. So there are some ways that you can sort of measure these two against each other. But I've actually found that Champion of Impulse has been a pretty good card of late just because of the new Praxis insignia that is actually coming out in the set and also was available for like a little bonus thing for people who got, I think, some sort of Flame of Zolta pack, something along those lines. So yeah, the insignias, the Praxis insignia has made cards like these a lot more viable because we now have at least 4 different hybrid power sources that we can pull out, which really, really help out on these kind of like crazy beaters. This card seems ridiculously overpowered. It's very, very good. It's definitely one of the like key rares of the set for Praxis, and it should be pretty aggressively fun for a lot of different reasons. That being said, there are ways that a 3-cost 4/4 that takes a little bit of influence to get going is not going to fit every deck. It really only fits decks, in fact, that are pretty large Praxis. But the ability to play the top card of your deck is useful even if you aren't playing cards that are cheaper. So it's even if you aren't playing cards that are like super expensive, because you get a lot of card value out of it, and it means that the more power you are accumulating, the more Ramba Arena Showman is showing off and getting you tons and tons of card advantage. So very, very good stat line, extremely good on-hit effect, and then the pay 7 ability also synergizes really well. So there's just nothing but upside to Ramba Arena Showman. This is clearly a card that has a ton of power points allocated to it. I wouldn't say it is atrocious, but it's definitely just, yeah, absolutely a great card for any sort of tier 1 Praxis deck. And since Praxis is something that may be lacking in power points of late, like in particular, like we have a lot of Praxis with Primal Splash, this is something that maybe encourages you to move away from that and get a bit deeper into just straight up fire time. And I've been noting in Flame of Zolta there does seem to be a pretty interesting like hybrid feel to it. I've definitely seen, like, you know, you see the big legendaries with the triple influence in both setups. Now we're seeing these cheaper double cost rares that are also like really, really deep in influence. These cards tend to encourage you to run, I think, 2-color decks specifically and move away from like 3-color decks, or of course the 1-color decks that were so outrageously popular in the previous set. That doesn't mean that there aren't good synergies between all of those setups. I mean, obviously insignias are a thing, so you can do some pretty wild stuff with Ramba Arena Showman and playing Godon or Zumacan, but like I would say that is the type of setup that actually makes it a little bit more encouraging to go into these faction pairings. So something to keep in mind, like this card is clearly pushed and it's clearly pushing a particular meta thing. It's a lot of fun to play. The play pattern to it seems great, so I think that's well worth looking at, and like overall just seems like a really, really strong card. So definitely going to go into that. Okay, yeah, like certainly not a card to miss if you are playing in the particular setup. I don't believe I covered Conservatory Alchemists last time around. Oh no, this one's too big. Okay. It's always going to be the wrong size. Always, always, always. Well, there's Relentless Combatant behind us because we have to resize things, but yep, all the spoilers come in different sizes, so sometimes they don't quite work. Conservatory Alchemist. When you play a curse, your units get +1 strength as a 2/2 for Unseen. So Unseen Tribal, but also a reliable 2/2 that you can play in hybrid colors. Not too bad. And the fact that it gives you a full rally effect on every unit, not your other units, just your units. So it buffs Conservatory Alchemist to a 3/2 every time you play a curse, which is already a reasonable stat line, and it makes everything bigger if you play curses in general. So this card is wild. There's a lot of interesting things that you can do with it. The main thing, of course, is that if you're just playing for Permafrosts in an Unseen deck, you're probably not going to feel too bad about playing this as a basic 2-drop to get your Unseen aggro into gear, and I think that overall that's probably all you really need. There's probably likely to be some good curses in the deck if we are seeing a focus on Unseen in general, also because we have seen Felrook, the Unseen card, the legendary, so we know that there is an Unseen, like, sort of boss type fellow, and we also know that like Unseen are probably going to be a thing in this set, and that Feln is a pushed faction in this set, so it seems reasonable to think that Conservatory Alchemist is going to see a lot of backup and should be a strong card for basically making Feln do some interesting and aggressive things. Curses in general haven't been that strong, but there are plenty of decent ones, and certainly Permafrost is amongst them. I would be extremely surprised if we didn't see a few more curses that make Conservatory Alchemist well into the viable range, and I would also be very surprised if we didn't see a Feln aggro deck make a tier 1 or tier 2 list very early on in the overall set of things. And, you know, yeah, it seems like a pretty good cheap option to get your aggro deck started in the new set, so certainly not something to miss. Okay, Vicious Rejuvenation, 8 cost, triple shadow, swap your health with the enemy player's health. This is pretty ridiculous and dirtily. There's a lot of weird things that you can do with it. If you like are playing around with life gain and strange setups, then you can do some pretty wild things with this. Like I think the most interesting thing about this is probably to go for like Unspeakable Torment, and then if it just doesn't go your way, you can swap out and maybe do something weird. Like, I don't know, this card is not like amazing, especially since it's not a fast spell or anything like that. It would be ridiculous as a fast spell, just utterly absurd, but there's some potential things that you can do with it that kind of make some interesting things happen. Obviously, the combo is like if you can play 15 power, you can just give Vicious Rejuvenation to Last Stand at the Gate, do like 7 health or something like that, swap it with your opponent, and then smack him in the face with a big weapon. There's some dumb things going on there. It's pretty interesting. I would say overall this legendary is not one of the more powerful legendaries in the set, but it is something fun that you can do, and notably you can use it to viciously rejuvenate your opponent, which is kind of trolly. I'm kind of surprised that you can do that when you are higher health than your opponent, because it's something that you can sort of, you can like give your opponent's health for reasons that don't make any sense, which could be potentially good. Yeah, this card counters hard life gain, which is a thing in Xenon right now, so that might be part of the reason why it exists as a sort of weird sort of staple card to mess with decks that are playing high amounts of life gain and are really like sort of pushing on you with that. Like if you actually Vicious Rejuvenation somebody who is playing the Unspeakable Torment deck, that's a really interesting counter to that kind of is fun, and also is just one of those dumb things that you can have in your deck. This is not a powerful card. I wouldn't play it particularly well. It does have some cute things that you can do with it, like, yeah, Temporal Distortion, people are suggesting, with Vicious Rejuvenation is hilarious, weird tricks, but overall, I just don't think that it has a lot going on in terms of overall power, and 8-drop, you're generally looking for a little bit more with that board state. But potentially something wild happens with this. There might very likely be some sort of interesting combo, and like if it doesn't combo, it's just a pretty fun card, so certainly got no objections there. Alright. Yeah, what else have we got? So those are the 3 like major ones that we did not spoil from last time, unless I've missed one. Oh yeah, I think we did miss High Prophet of Soul, I think, the last time around, which was a 1/3 that is too small. Hello? Or a 0/3 for 2 that has +1 maximum power, which is solid. Like, this is actually the second card with 3 health and +1 maximum power, which already means that you can potentially play it in some interesting decks. But says that when a cultist goes to your void, you get +1 maximum power. And I kind of have to check real quick to see if Zindel the Wayfinder is a cultist, because that's an important question for me in particular. Now he's a mystic, what a bummer. But yeah, like overall, like what this card is doing is giving you a decent amount of maximum power, a cultist engine, so the first cultist tribal that we've seen in like Xenon setups, which is pretty interesting in general, and then also allows you to do some other wild things with like just sort of making like interesting reincarnation decks happen. This is like a Zindel the Wayfinder Light, which overall a light version of a Zindel the Wayfinder could be particularly strong, and like if you're doing self-mill type stuff, this actually really supports that kind of Invoke the Waystones weirdo deck that throws a bunch of cultists in the void in a very short period of time. So yeah, I'm pretty down with this. It seems like an interesting card. There's a lot of interesting ways that it can go crazy, and like if it's not going crazy, you're probably just keeping it as a way to get from 2 power to 4 while also running the other card that gets you from 2 power to 4, the 1/3 I think it's called, oh man, I always lose the name of it. It's like Acolyte of Sands or something like that. But yeah, the 1/3 that you can also get +1 maximum power off of. Like this gives you a couple more ways to do that without having to like lose your maximum power to cards like Vara's Favor or the very easy things to kill your small stuff, Lightning Storm, that kind of thing. So Devotee of Sands, yes, it's a variation on Initiative Sands. So okay. But yeah, so that, and I think the only other one that we might have missed was, there was a green card. I don't seem to have it here. It's a 3/3 that gives, it's literally just a 3/3 for 1 green that gives you summon +3/+3. Not super exciting, but certainly an interesting card in draft. 3/3s for 3 are pretty valuable. And oh, there it is, Seasoned Drill Master. And yeah, summon, give one of your other units +3/+3 this turn. Certainly a useful effect if you're playing it in a limited format. Like this is a very powerful way to push a unit across on 3. I think it's actually a really, really ridiculous effect and should be quite strong in green for like making green decks. This is something you should pick highly as an uncommon if you're playing a limited format, because it's just very, very good at getting some interesting aggression going on. So cool stuff going on with that, and certainly an interesting card in general. This is a Minotaur, but it's also notably a Zilta Minotaur. There's different background as far as like what kind of style the architecture is, and also there's some interesting things going on with like these sort of glowing gems. So I think a lot of the cards are actually from Zilta, but that's something to note for like overall setup. This is awesome for Hojin. Oh, it doesn't work on Hojin. It doesn't trigger Hojin's ability, but you can still do it, of course. Yeah. So yes, the final thing to look at is our new keyword. We have a new skill, and bearing the lead a little bit on that. Oh no, I've lost it. All right, hang on a sec. Okay, which is Mastery. Yeah, I've got a little bit of a bug here. Okay, that's resolved. Cool. So, Mastery, 4 cost, 2/3, first things first, Relentless Combatant, 4 cost, 2/3, Berserk, Mastery 8+2/+2. What is Mastery, we say? So, the way that Mastery works is that if a unit deals damage and survives the combat, so if it is going to push damage through any sort of like killer attack, I believe it works with any sort of like triggered effect like Wump or something like that. Anytime that it deals damage and survives dealing the damage, it will get points of Mastery, and once it gets a full 8 points of Mastery, it'll get whatever the Mastery bonus is, like an ultimate effect. It does keep track of Mastery through each set of like changes. So if you are moving it into the void and it has Mastery 3, it will still have Mastery 3 when you pull it out of the void and continue to progress towards 8. However, if you get the Mastery bonus, then you can reset it the same as an ultimate by changing zones, putting it back in your hand, or resurrecting it from the void. But in general, anytime that you are dealing damage and surviving combat, Mastery gives you the ability to get some sort of extra benefit from this. This is very similar to, and I would say a better design than the like quest line from Magic, where you are particularly trying to accomplish a goal and then you're getting something cool out of it. And like, yeah, it seems like something that's definitely pretty interesting overall. Like you can do quite a bit of stuff with it, but mostly it's just a way to reward you for doing the things that you most want to do in the game, which is attacking, dealing damage, and interacting with your opponent in ways that are particularly beneficial. If your opponent is turning off your interaction, like this is all of the reasons to like try to prevent your opponent from like removing all your stuff and just attack in for lots and lots of damage. So yeah, it's a good skill to make sure that gameplay goes well. I wouldn't say that it's like particularly exciting, but there are some nice things about a character who levels up to master and then gets to get that extra benefit. So Relentless Combatant is a 2/3. On Mastery 8, it can get it on 2 attacks with its Berserk ability, but it takes a little bit. You have to get some sort of weapon on it at the very least to get it across for that amount of damage. So, but if you can't push it up to that amount of damage and it's still got the Berserk, that's a useful thing. I would say that Berserk and Mastery 8 are a little bit at odds here, since if you trigger Berserk, you aren't going to get another Berserk attack, but you will probably get the Mastery, which will then give you a Relentless 4/5. I would say Relentless Combatant is not a strong common in general, and probably won't be particularly playable except in sealed formats or any sort of draft format if you have a pile of interesting tricks. Like, this card behaves pretty well with Daring Maneuver, but like even with Daring Maneuver, if you're Daring Maneuvering over something, you won't get Mastery immediately and you'll still be stuck with a Berserk attacking unit afterwards. So this is probably the weakest of the Mastery cards that we are going to reveal. There's quite a few of them, and there are some really interesting things that you can do with them, but like this one's overall just kind of an interesting demonstration of what Mastery is. So other options that we have include Sword of Judgment, a 4-cost 1/1 that has Mastery 5 +4/+4. This is notable because it gives Mastery 5 to the unit. So if you're putting this on a 4/4 or smaller, then, or a 4/4 or larger, then this will immediately get Mastery on the turn that you attack, which certainly not a bad thing to do if you want to get a 4/4 weapon on something for 4. That's a very strong draft option. Like, if you're just trying to get a big, nasty, scary weapon that triggers on the turn after you play it, that's the kind of thing that you really want to do. That seems quite good. Yeah, this on like the 4/4 Endurance Flyer is just a game win in draft, so that's sort of the position that you want to play it in. As a colorless card, I don't think it's terribly weak for what it's doing, but it's also not particularly ranked playable, so... But interesting, again, just in terms of what kind of effect it'll have on the draft environment. Everybody will probably have these, and you'll have to keep an eye out for them against flyer decks and large tramplers and many other interesting things. So something to keep an eye out for. Another Mastery card we have here is Thunderclaw Raven. Flying, Mastery 6, draw a curse of your choice from your deck. So once again, we have a curse themes matter, which means that there are going to be better curses, but also like we have a 2/1 flyer with an ability that requires him to attack 3 times to get the Mastery. So I'm not wild about this again in ranked. Like, this seems like an awful lot to do, especially when you are comparing it to something like Acquisitive Crow, which is a 2/2 that gets immediate value on attack and gets it in a way that is very, very beneficial. But the overall Mastery ability does make some sense again in like a limited format. So all 3 of these interesting limited cards do really cool things. I think this is probably going to be a fairly limited driven mechanic, just because it's designed to really sort of help you out when you are doing the things that really matter in limited, which is attacking with lots and lots of small creatures. So there's a lot of value to that, and of course grabbing something like an Ascendel's Gift or a Permafrost or like basically anything useful that's interesting in curses could really like make your day in a draft format. We'll have to see what curses, of course, are released, but I really don't doubt that there's going to be some good ones that we can actually throw out, so something worth looking at. All right. Now, the last Mastery card is the most exciting, and this one is the one that actually might see some play in a ranked setting, and that is Akko, Inspired Artist. Akko, Inspired Artist... Ooh. Change the wrong one. Here we go. Akko. Akko, Inspired Artist is a 1-cost 1/1. With Mastery 1, play a +1/+2 weapon on Akko, and Mastery 9, units and weapons in your deck get +4/+2 and Overwhelm. So, 1/1, the next... As soon as it attacks, it becomes a 2/3, and then if it continues to attack and deal damage over the course of the game, you got to keep track of that, because once it gets to 9, it gives you a massive buff, Navani style, to every unit and weapon in your deck, notably making relic weapons particularly strong. And if you're playing it in a relic weapon deck, this is a really wild deck card for that deck, because you have a lot of removal to get Akko across and get those +1/+2 bonuses. Like if you're playing this with just something like the 2/2 weapon for 2, you can immediately kill your opponent's 2-drop and then swing in with Akko, get the +1/+2 bonus. Then you're moving into cards like Auric Runehammer, cards like Null Blade, basically basically any number of other options where you can slowly get your Rakano rolling and then get into very large overwhelm weapons that also apply overwhelm to your spells. So Akko's got some pretty interesting moves right there if you're playing relic weapons. Also strong in aggressive decks with lots of torches, lots of ways to exhaust things, lots of ways to just sort of get Akko across in better ways and go for lots and lots of damage. So all of that's pretty interesting. I will say that like a 1-1 for 1 is not an amazing stat line, and if you can't get Akko to attack across, say your opponent is just say you're going second and your opponent is popping down like Black Hole War Leader on 2, it's a little bit rough here because you might not really be able to get Akko to do anything over the course of the game. So you do have to have some ways of getting Akko across. Torch is synergy enough to some extent, but I think other forms of removal are going to be pretty relevant if you're not going to be able to do that thing. Thanks for the raid, Blue Sky Drag. But yeah, like this is a card that you could definitely see in a sort of interesting, I would actually say it's probably not an aggro card, but rather a more of a tempo card, because it gives you some way to efficiently spend power early on, and then you allow that power to spiral out of control while playing other threats constantly. That kind of thing really, really sort of measures out in the end and gets you into some wild mid-range and potentially even like control range threats where you can actually do some pretty wild things. So yeah, interesting Oni, and there are a lot of ways to, of course, buff Oni. There's a green card that gives your Onis +4/+4 and can trigger Akko very, very quickly. So Rakano Onis are probably going to be back in style for a while. Certainly look forward to that. But yeah, this is a good take on the kind of like things that you can do with Mastery and with questing in general. So this seems like a really interesting option, and I think overall it looks like something well worth playing. So yeah, this one is, compared to the cards that like were clearly like tier 1 and the cards that we've clearly seen in draft, this one I'm more middle of the road on. I think it's definitely interesting. It does some wild things with Onis, but I also think that it's pretty conservative in its power level and does require you to play a pretty fair game to get to the sort of benefits that you want. That being said, it is a really fun card. There's a lot of interesting things that it can do, so worth playing and lots of cool stuff to happen with that. So yeah, Mastery is the first mechanic that we've seen from Flame of Zilta. I'm looking forward to seeing, I believe there are supposed to be 5 mechanics in Flame of Zilta. One of them may be Spellcraft, because Spellcraft is coming back. So there should be a lot of interesting things happening, and I'm looking forward to seeing what all we find in the Mastery category. Should be really, really interesting, and what other skills show up should be pretty wild. So that's Flame of Zilta for the moment, and we'll be back with more spoilers soon. Got a couple of other things in the mix, and other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see y'all next time. Cheers.